Do the 30-second. Okay, we're live. We're live.
Hi.
Hi, Ashley. Great.
We're here. Thank you for having
We're
me.
here. I am so sorry. For those of you listening and had tuned in earlier, I'm really sorry for the technical difficulties. I had some today. Hope everybody can forgive me for that. But anyway, I'm so excited to welcome Ashley Ryder with me today on the Cafecito of United Latinas. She is a superpower Latina in so many ways, and I'm thrilled to call her my friend and to have her on this Cafecito podcast with us today. It's going to be super exciting. And I can't wait for everybody to learn from you, Ashley. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself and start to tell us a little bit about your amazing self. And then
Absolutely.
we can continue our conversation.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. This organization and group is phenomenal. I wish I knew about this sooner so I could be could have been a bigger part of it. But, I'm a supporter and we just need more of this. So thank you for all your leadership and thank you for bringing us all together. I'm Ashley. I was born and raised in New York City in the forgotten borough of Staten Island, New York. My mom is Puerto Rican, came from a very big Puerto Rican family, and my father is a Turkish immigrant. And so I grew up with rice and beans and kebab and a beautiful mix of all different cultures. And I'm very, very proud of where I come from. And it's very important to who I am today and how I do things. And I know we're going to talk about that in this conversation, throughout this conversation. I studied really hard because of my parents, and they were very blue collar, and they said education was a really big thing and I should prioritize it. And so I did. And I got into my first choice school, which was Brown University. I really love Brown because of the open curriculum. It allowed us to be creative as students, as young adults, and, put forth our own paths, which was really great. I always had a interest in entrepreneurship. It's mostly came from my dad and him sitting me down and watching programs like The Big Idea with Donnie Deutsch on CNBC to hear entrepreneurs and their crazy stories and how they fulfilled the American dream. And so that sparked my interest as a young girl. And when I got to Brown, started getting very involved in the earliest innings of what was entrepreneurship on campus. So I led the Brown Entrepreneurship Program. I, created a group of women who were interested in entrepreneurship as young students. But being from the background that I was from, was pushed to get a big brand name on my resume. So after school, I joined Morgan Stanley. I was on a capital markets desk there covering consumer and tech public equities, really learned about markets and storytelling around companies. So that was really great. But again, going back to sort of the entrepreneurship interests and roots, was very, very interested in actually having operating experience and getting operating experience. And so left Morgan Stanley to join a Y Combinator e-commerce startup called Shoptiques.com. Shoptiques was basically building digital storefronts for mom and pop boutiques. And, that was a really wonderful experience. Literally was on the phone, trying to sell the product to small and medium-sized boutique owners, and learned all the ins and outs of early stage company building. Then got tapped on the shoulder and went back to big corporate to buy and build consumer technology, and went to business school because I said to myself, I hit a point in my career where I wanted to maybe go back to the investing side, the finance side, but with the tech edge. And so went to MIT Sloan, did a few different venture, jobs. I worked for, Brand Foundry Ventures, Founders Factory, did some time at Dorm Room Fund, which is a student-run fund, and then discovered Vamos Ventures. And I did not know about this whole space of venture capital meets impact, and, that I could invest in the community that I came from. And, and the rest was history. I've been at the fund for the past 6 years. I was the fund's first full-time hire. We're building a, generational platform that invests in founders at the earliest stages, building highly scalable tech companies who identify as Latino, Hispanic, and generally diverse. We cover 4 key areas: healthcare, fintech, future of work, and climate. And we are true believers that you can have impact and returns at the same time. And really, when I think about sort of my purpose, it is to build this generational wealth through investing in tech companies for our community that then gets funneled back into really great, people becoming angel investors or 3 times founders or running their own venture funds. And so that's the goal. And I'm happy to be here. So thank you.
That is a really big story, my dear friend. There's a lot to unpack there.
A lot of zigzags.
Lot to unpack. And I love all of it. But let's get a little bit of insight into Ashley. Like, how was that, a Turkish father and a Puerto Rican mother? I mean, that's quite a combination. How do you think that sort of? I love the Donny Deutsch reference for those of us that are not in New York. He's quite a personality and a character, so I sort of love that. But how do you think that influenced you on how, like, you work with founders or look at opportunities? Do you think having both those sides influences how you make decisions or how you take different journeys or paths?
For sure. It makes me more of an understanding investor. When I say understanding investor, it's not just looking at the brand names of MIT, Harvard, Stanford, or, this person grew up here, or, this person worked here, because I've had a lot of zigzags, some at really great prestigious institutions, some at, no-name startups and tech companies. You have to really peel the onion back and see someone for who they really are and sort of the distance they traveled. And coming from the background that I came from and having, being sort of multicultural, growing up in, the forgotten borough of New York City, I was, really considered like sort of an underdog coming from where I came from. And, hard work and hustle. And a little bit of luck too, actually, maybe a lot of bit of luck sort of got me to where I am. And so I think it's the perfect storm of all those things, and, really taking it for, again, like, how much distance has this person traveled from where they started and where they came from. That is the most important thing to me. Because life is hard. Getting a prestigious job is hard. Running a startup is really hard, right? And if this person keeps doing really hard things and achieving really hard things, that's the most, important aspect, right? Because that means that they can, nothing scares them, and they've stopped at nothing, right, to achieve a goal. And that resiliency and that ambitiousness, from when I was little, I think carried me throughout my career, and now is what, we have at Vamos building this fund, but also the types of founders that we invest in is like, can they get through, hoops and dives and all this stuff to achieve the goal, to achieve their vision.
Right. That's amazing. Love the forgotten borough, Staten Island too. That's hilarious. Yeah, I think you're right. I think when you think about building companies or being an entrepreneur, there's so many facets to it, right? And I always say to people that like want to get into this world of entrepreneurship or small business owners, I know with United Latinas, a lot of our members are on Latina entrepreneurs and small business owners, and they're really growing their business. But what I always say to other people is it's not for everybody, and that's okay too. Like, it can be sexy and cool to go to Brown and MIT and be a partner in a fund and do everything that you did, which is amazing. But it may not be for everybody. And for some people, it may be great to climb the corporate ladder and go through that journey. But I do think there is an element of having a multicultural background that you have, and the grit and the desire and the sort of bootstrapping, right? Because I'm an immigrant and I come from immigrant parents, that sort of does fit the entrepreneur journey, I think, a little bit more, because you have to have that sort of, I always say you have to have the right stomach to be a small business owner or entrepreneur, because there are, sleepless nights and where's, how am I going to pay my employees, or how am I going to fund this? And, as immigrants or children of immigrants or immigrants ourselves, there is that sort of like, you've got to keep going and going and going, and you can't ever stop, because, it's sort of you've come here, it's the American dream, right? And so you have to like have that grit and that sense of battle.
That's right. And, and scrappiness in this market environment is very much rewarded. And, who is disproportionately scrappy and sort of their approach in building companies, it is immigrants, sons and daughters of immigrants and diverse folks, because they've had to, do a lot with a little for a long time. And, seeing that in my childhood with my parents, I said, I'm going to do as best as possible with the resources that I'm given to, not only achieve this for myself, but to help others, right? Build their dreams and to invest in their dreams. And it really is, now I'm at sort of in a really great spot where I'm seeing sort of this next generation who has even more resources, who could build faster with technology and AI and, going better, faster, stronger. And what excites me most is that this changing pipeline of entrepreneurs, and that, let's call it 10 years ago, Latino Hispanic founders were saying, oh, hey, we could just build in sort of more of these traditional industries like restaurants, hospitality. But now, STEM degree attainment in the community is in the double digits. And people are saying, wait, I can also build AI companies, right? And build really fast. So that's been really exciting to see in my seat.
That's amazing. And Ashley, let's just take something a step back, because I think you talked about venture capital and its social impact. And I'm not sure everybody understands what that means. Can you explain that a little bit further? I mean, I think that's a great field that venture capital and capital in general has moved into, in acknowledging this whole idea of social impact. But you're obviously the expert, and I'd love to get some insight for you, for everybody listening, about what exactly that means and how do you define social impact?
Yeah. And like I said, I did not know that, impact venture capital was even a career, until I actually got to business school. So when we think about sort of, traditional venture capital, it is funding and seeding companies, tech companies, so highly scalable, repeatable revenue companies enabled by tech at the earliest stages. It could be, just add an idea. It could be that, you're out in market and have some, indications of product market fit. So that's venture capital sort of as an asset class, very risky, right? High risk, high reward, and, very concentrated portfolio. Typically a venture fund like ours would have about 30 companies in each fund. Now mix that with, okay, there's this impact element, and impact to us means several different things and could mean something completely different for another impact fund. But for us, it means building wealth for diverse communities. It means, putting money towards diverse founders with big ideas. And it means, helping diversify tech on the whole, in that the companies that we invest in are creating jobs filled by diverse talent, are bringing, more of a diverse board, are, hiring third-party contractors, for example, that identify as diverse. And by the way, diversity just doesn't mean Hispanic, Latino. It is woman, immigrant, anyone who's overlooked, underserved by traditional venture capital dollars. And we all know 98% of venture capital dollars don't, go to more traditional founders, right? So it's the 2% that's forgotten, but it's a really, 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 big opportunity. And so, outside of sort of this impact bucket, it's good business, right? Investing in Latino and diverse founders is sort of this next wave of where this country is going, and that there's really important demographic shifts to pay attention to. And so again, it's not just the impact piece, it's that this is really good business that folks should get ahead of, right? And invest in.
Yeah, I love that. And I also, some of the things that we also talk a lot about at United Latinas and look at is generational wealth, right? And giving these opportunities. And I really love what you said of like the younger generation now who are pitching you at Vamos and who are diverse founders, both female, Latinos, Latinas, Black, brown, all that, and saying, we don't just need to go traditional route. Like there's other opportunities in industries, and we can grow in that too. And we can also build that generational wealth, but also that generational education, I think is really important, right? Like the fact that like your parents said to you, or you watching Donnie Deutsch with your dad and instilling this, it's now like, well, you can now pass that on and keep going. But I think it's also back to this idea of your superpowers. I think it also allows you to look at the bigger picture of what's happening, or look at founders and have genuine conversations of like, where do you want to take this and how do you want to build this, but also what's the legacy you want to leave, right?
That's right. And And what's really interesting, and I think, a tail into sort of the market and market dynamics is like right now it's a founder's market, right? If you're building a hot AI company, you can be selective as to who's on your cap table. Vamos Ventures as a fund has been able to win out on really competitive deals because of this cultural competency piece where founders are saying, I want a cap table that understands me culturally, personally. That could be my Tio on the cap table, right? Instead of just a transactional investor. And we've been able to win out on deals on that alone. Of course, we have other things like a really strong network, business development opportunities, additional, connectivity to subsequent rounds of funding for future finances, right? But really, it's been this cultural competency piece. It's been this trustworthy piece. And, it's hard to replicate that. Right? You wouldn't know if you don't come from the community, if you don't have that lived experience. And again, as we're trying to differentiate ourselves in the venture capital space and working with founders are getting it because it's becoming more and more important.
I love that. And I like to say to some founders too that I consult with and I talk to, you've got to look both sides. Yep. Not every investor is a perfect investor for you, and not every founder is a perfect founder for venture capital. Like, there is a dance that needs to be done, right? And there are these kind of conversations, and you have to be able to relate to each other. Just a quick definition for people that are listening. Define cap table for us, just so that everybody knows.
It's a capitalization table. So basically it details who the investors are, how much they own of your company and shares and percentages. That's sort of the most simplistic explanation for it.
Great. It's always good because we don't always want to assume everybody understands.
That's right. I'm in my venture speak saying all the buzzwords. So please let me know if you explain anything.
So a couple of questions. If we have some younger, or if we have some Latinas listening to us, or as members of United Latinas that want to get into the venture capital world or want to take a path like you did, Ashley, what are some practical tools or some recommendations that you can give them as well?
I think Latinas are the perfect personality type, and mind you, there's so much diversity within Latinas ourselves, right? But I think the culture is very sort of helpful to a career in venture capital because of a couple of things. And I'll tell you what it is to be a really great venture capital investor. It's curiosity. It's, sales skills and selling not only, an idea of what your venture fund is and what it's offering, but selling founders, to partner with you. So it's curiosity, it's sales, it's, hustle in that building a network and, watering your network is really, really important because it comes back to you, whether it's a founder referral or an investor referral to do a hot deal, it comes back to you. And it is the scrappiness. We're an emerging fund, Vamos Ventures. We're not, yet at $1 billion of AUM, right? Assets under management. We're getting there, right, by building our platform. And so we are a startup ourselves as a fund. We're building processes. We're learning from our investments. We're building our platform. And so the scrappiness of like, how do we do these types of things? How do we build the ship and sail it at the same time? That scrappiness and that thought process is also really important for a venture career. So all those different things. Now, if you want to get into venture, it is one of those industries where you have to do the job before you get the job. And what does that mean? It means, being proactive. And so going and showing up to tech and VC events in your ecosystems. And there's so many newsletters and, public forums where you can find what these events are, showing up, engaging, making sure people know that you're there. The second thing is being helpful to both investors and founders as you're going through the recruiting process. What do I mean by that? I mean, reaching out to investors and sharing your perspective. Perspective is so important. Being opinionated is so important in this space. And so to say, hey, this is where I think, for example, the retail space is going, and knowing that an investor cares about the retail space, That's really value add. Same thing with founders. If you are, a really good finance person, sitting down with the founder and offering your help as to, hey, let me build your model or help you build your model or think through this, they remember that, right? And will become your champions when you go out to recruit for venture capital. And then the last thing is, having a thesis and perspective. I think it's related to my last point of, where do you think the world's going? Everyone has such interesting, unique lived and work experience that uniqueness can be shared and is really important to people who will and want want to listen. And so having perspective, being public and vocal about it, and being shameless about it is really important.
And do if it's more younger or people transitioning careers or having a slightly different, wanting to take a different path, do some of the venture capital firms offer internships or opportunities like that as well, or is it basically coming out of business school, or is it both?
Yeah, I've seen people break in many different ways through formal programs. Pledge LA is a wonderful program for those based in Los Angeles. New York City has a really wonderful new NYC VC internship program. So there is formal programming to get you exposure to venture capital and to help you break in. Business school is another sort of launch pad for venture careers. But you've also seen people getting in out of undergrad, right, through formal internship programs, and also career transitions, right? If you work hard enough and if you have a specific skill set, venture funds really appreciate that. Now, all of this aside, what sort of is, I think, most appreciated in terms of the venture skill set, it is the operating experience. It is, have you been a founder and/or have you helped build something at the earliest stages because you could speak the venture capital and startup language and you could relate to founders more. That is why I made the jump from big bank to startup, to say, okay, now I know what it really takes to build an early stage startup. Mind you, it was a year, but I learned so much in that year that I ever would working at, in big corporate about startup and venture. And so, I encourage everyone who's interested in venture on this call to maybe think about and dabble in whether it's starting your own company or joining an early stage high flying startup. Because 1 year in startup world is 10 years anywhere else. And you know this, Karina.
Yeah, I love that. And so let's flip it a little bit on the other side. Ashley, what are recommendations to some of our powerhouse Latinas or Latinas that are interested in becoming angel investors or limited partners in funds? Or what are some recommendations to them on how to look at that or decide to get into that, or just some of your thoughts on that? I would love to hear.
Absolutely. There's really wonderful angel, training programs. I know I'm a part of, before I was an investor, something called Modern Angels. There are regional ones like New York Angels, Boston Angels. So I would research maybe some angel networks to start dabbling in. What are good deals? How do I be a really great angel investor? Network is also another important aspect of this. Like, build your network by going to tech events, whether they're in person or virtual, and get to know the folks around the table, whether they're founders or, really great investors, and say, hey, learn from them. Like, what makes a good investment? How do you look at deals? How do you find your deals? Eventually, I think great angel investors build their own networks and track records and don't even need sort of these larger groups, right? So if you have an area that you're passionate about, if you have an expertise, that you're willing to sort of double down on and showcase, that is going to make you win out on deals as an angel. And so I think sort of the theme here is network, show up, engage, and have people know who you are. And I think opportunities will come your way. I know opportunities will come your way.
That's amazing. I love that. But again, I'm going to keep bringing it full circle. I think that having the diverse background and having multicultural backgrounds, and that sort of forces you to kind of be sort of a chameleon at times, right?
Yep.
Because you grow up in this like mix,
Yep.
and this mixed environment that I think also can be really helpful as an entrepreneur, as a founder, as an investor, to being able to also read the room and have these kind of conversations. And I think that's really valuable and powerful.
And a really interesting sticking point in a lot of these rooms. So I create a really strong network with the diverse founder community, for example, in New York, right? New York, New Jersey, because that's where I'm based, and mostly East Coast. And a lot of me getting into those rooms was because of my affinity for diverse entrepreneurs, for Latino, Latina investors and founders. And so I created sort of this niche for myself of like, here's my interesting and unique understanding, right, from the founder and investor side. Let me organize events, let me partner on events, let me be helpful in, coffee sessions, right, to founders and other folks trying to break in. And, that network grew very, slowly but surely. And, it eventually becomes sort of an interesting moat and, value proposition for yourself. So stick on to that affinity. It's so important.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so important. So one of my final questions now, if I flip it even further and I say there's some entrepreneurs or founders listening to this call who are part of United Latinas or not and listening to this podcast, what's some of the best advice you can give founders that are trying to raise?
Yeah. It takes a lot to get to a yes. And especially, it is a founder market. So again, if you're building some high-flying AI company, maybe the conversations are easier. But I think for most, it is taking some time, right? And so my advice would be to be mindful and thoughtful and do your research on an investor base that is aligned to you and what you're building. Don't go to a generalist tech fund if you're building a healthcare company that's more care services or digital health. It may not be a fit, right? And so do research before you talk to investors as to, do they care about what I'm building? Do they have a thesis in what I'm building? And then that conversation becomes smoother. And there's a stronger line, right, and thread into sort of relatability. That's one. The second is leverage your founder networks and founder communities to do diligence on investors and like who's actually deploying capital. There are so many investors, for example, that say, oh yeah, we do pre-seed or we do early stage. And then when you actually talk to them, they say, oh, no, we're just doing seed right now, right? And so due diligence via your founder networks, because the founder networks are going to be the most true and truthful to sort of the process. And then the third thing is talk big. And what I mean by that is you need to sell investors on a vision. An investor's job is to pick, in a portfolio of 30 companies, the thought is that 1 to 3 are going to return our fund, right? So 1 to 3 will be huge unicorn companies. You have to sell investors that there is a path to $100 million of revenue or more, and that your company will become a unicorn. Again, highly scalable, repeatable revenue. Paint that vision, and I think a lot of your conversations will hopefully be successful.
I love that. And I know I keep bringing it back to the Latina superpower, but I think also the ability to talk a big game.
Yeah. The storytelling piece is huge. It really is
huge. And I think, we come from cultures of storytelling, right? There's always like a story about abuela always had a story, or abuela always had a story, or like la tia or el tío always had a story. There's always like a story, right? And I think, for me, also one of the superpowers of Latinas is to be agile, right? And to be creative, right? We have this because of the countries we come from and the environments we come from, like we are taught from a very young age to be agile, to be like creative, to be able to bob and weave and go. And I think that's a really incredible ability, right? And then as a founder or entrepreneur, if you are looking for capital, to be able to be creative in your story and your thought process and to think bigger and wider, because that's just how we were raised, I think is really a beautiful thing.
And on that note too, adaptability and how quick can you change with the market. I think that's also something really interesting from the culture and how adaptable we all are and can be. And that is what makes a great founder. It's putting something out there, getting feedback, iterating, and rinsing and repeating that until you have something that is sticking. And I think, at least in our humble opinion as investors of Vamos Ventures, that is what we see these founders in our portfolio, diverse Latina founders, doing really, really well, and that makes for a great entrepreneur.
That's amazing. I could talk to you forever because I have spoken to you forever, and I could keep going, but I may get yelled at by the powers that be of United Latinas. So, but Ashley, if people have questions or if they want to find you or they're interested in Vamos Ventures or they have a brilliant idea to pitch to you or just want some advice, how can they find you?
Well, I'm always reachable at ashley@vamosventures.com. So please feel free to reach out. We usually kick off our process with something called our Founders Forum. If there are any entrepreneurs who are building seed Series A companies, even at the earliest stages, we like to develop a relationship. So even at pre-seed, you'll go to vamosventures.com. You'll click on the 4 founders, and then our Founders Forum is linked there. We read that every week. We review that every week, and we reach out to schedule calls or give you feedback. So please feel free to reach out on, with the Founders Forum or with my email address, and I'm happy to have a chat.
I love that. And I can vouch for Ashley, and what she's saying is true. And I love that you're talking about building relationships. And I think that's really important when it comes to looking for capital or growing your business or understanding those relationships. It's never too early to start them. A VC or an investor may say you're too early, but that doesn't mean you can't develop the relationship and have a relationship to move forward to, because you never know where it could possibly take you. So thank you for mentioning that. Ashley, this has been amazing. And to all of our United Latinas listening and who will listen, please join us at United Latinas, become a member. You get to meet amazing women like Ashley. So come with us on this amazing journey. Ashley, thank you so much for your time. I know you're super busy. I really, really appreciate you doing this with me today. And I'm so sorry for the technical difficulties.
No worries. I appreciate you having me, and please feel free to reach out. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.